voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
This is already a political crisis for the president. Here is just one ad that Biden, I think, has already created using Trump's own voice and his own words against him.
I wanted to always play it down. I still like playing it down.
While Donald Trump was telling America the virus was nothing to worry about, he knew it was deadly.
It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus. This is deadly stuff.
And now, 190,000 Americans are dead. Our economy crushed. Our kids not safe in school. And Trump knew it all along.
I wanted to always play it down. I still like playing it down.
You know, Alicia, since I was, too young to admit without feeling like a total political dork, I have studied politics, and every crisis that's ever engulfed and taken down a politician, whether incumbent or on the rise, was this question: what did he know and when did he know it? And here you have it. Here you have the answer. What did Donald Trump know about COVID and when did he know it? In his own voice, in his own words, in February, he knew it was more lethal than he was willing to tell any of us.
I think Phil just got it so right. I mean, this is a president who time and time again, going back 4 years, has relied on fear. He wanted Americans to believe that the greatest threat to American safety and security was migrants at our borders, was sanctuary cities, now is protesters across the country. And here you have underlining that the greatest threat to American safety and security is a president who downplayed a virus that has killed more than 192,000 Americans. And what I think is so powerful about that ad, Nicole, is that, we're looking through a lot of reporting right now, much of it about foreign actors interfering in our elections. And while that is an existential threat to our democracy, the lived experience of the coronavirus pandemic is undeniable. It's undeniable to all of those Americans who lost someone they loved. It's undeniable to Americans who have lost their job or whose small business is on the rocks. It's undeniable to Americans who are on the precipice of facing eviction and don't know where they're going to house their kids. It's very real for all of the caretakers who are trying to figure out how are they going to have remote learning for their children while they themselves do their jobs. So I think what you see the Biden campaign really underlining there is that this is happening. It is happening in people's lives. It's undeniable. And the point that I think we're going to hear a lot over the next few weeks, this could have been avoided.
And Nick Confessori, a place where this really imperils Donald Trump, I think it's twofold. One, as I said before, this is not reporting from Pulitzer Prize-winning journalists like any of you or your stellar news organizations. This is Trump in his own voice, not forced to do an interview, but clearly enjoying the interview. There were 18 of them. We've heard 4 one-minute snippets. And the real danger to Trump seems to be this headline, that Trump's lead over Biden on the economy is vulnerable. If it is known to everyone in this country, including all of his supporters, that he not only let people get exposed to a deadly virus, but he let the economy be, really racked and decimated in a lot of places by how long this has gone on. If we had sort of, with clear eyes, with masks, had sort of gone through this with all the information and with national leadership, some of those businesses that are still closed or struggling might be back open.
Well, look, Trump is the first candidate for president to launch an October surprise against himself. It's as if Nixon sent the Nixon tapes to Woodward in an envelope by FedEx. It's really astounding. It's really self-inflicted. And I think the great irony is twofold. First of all, it's great reporting and hard won, but in a strange way, it's unsurprising. It doesn't tell us anything that voters hadn't already known in most respects, which is he doesn't really value service or sacrifice. He thinks alliances are for suckers. He likes generals unless he hates his generals. And we know he was misleading the public about the science of COVID for a long time. But what's happening now politically is the president is paying a price, ironically, for his own refusal to fan the flames of panic back then. We are in a prolonged crisis because we used up, as a country, our runway, our lockdown runway, for months, kind of diddling over a response. And the pandemic spread. If he had gone out early on and said, this is really bad, here's the strategy, let's take it really seriously, it would have been so harmful to the country economically, but it could have been shorter and fewer lives could have been lost. And he's now paying the price for how long this is going on, for the businesses that are being racked and ruined, for the people who don't have jobs, for the parents who aren't sure if their kids are safe in school. It is now story number one as we head into the final weeks of this election.
Jeremy Bash, let me give you the last word. Can you just articulate what Bob Woodward means inside the institutions in which you serve, the CIA, the Pentagon, what sort of his decades of relationships can yield? And listen, I have my own experience and knowledge of just how right he gets it, and it wasn't always to the benefit of anyone I ever worked for. But can you just speak to that? Like, what does Bob Woodward have the ability to get? And I'm not sure. I mean, I think Nick put it perfectly. It's an October surprise from Donald Trump to Donald Trump. But in terms of his coverage, the picture he paints of the alarm that Donald Trump creates inside the intelligence community and the Pentagon, is there anything in that surprises you?
No, I think he writes the first draft of history, and I think by and large he's thought of as someone who faithfully records what happens in his reconstruction of conversations. And here there's no mystery because the president's on tape. The thing that I'm thinking over, Nicole, is it possible the president actually wanted, he on purpose, he wanted this virus to spread? And before everyone just jumps out of their chair and say, oh my God, how could that be? I mean, here's a guy who was flailing around for a reason to be in charge of something, to manage a crisis. He loved striding into that briefing room every day. I think he thought at some point it would redound to his benefit. And of course, the crisis, the COVID crisis, is going to compromise the ability to have an orderly election day. And if he's trailing in the polls, he may just want that. I think there's a part of this, Nicole, where he actually wants the chaos, and he wants the uncertainty, and he wants the lockdown because it may help him in early November.
It is Friday, the 11th of September of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Yes, we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Well, I tried to purchase some Saint-Germain here in the local liquor store in Rogue River, Oregon, and they somehow sold the last bottle they had just a week ago. So somebody else in this town is mixing a French 77, and I want to know who. Good for you. And I asked, I would presume there's not very many people mixing up French 77s in this town, and the lady at the liquor store concurred. Yeah, because, who's heard of it? I'll tell you. Well, we have wildfires all around us on this day of remembrance. Yes, it is 9/11. Where were you on that day? That's the question asked on social media. What were you doing? Well, I was getting up out here on the West Coast and living in my little domicile in Berkeley in the Elmwood. Part of the big Elmwood house, yeah. And so my buddy and his then girlfriend, longtime girlfriend at the time, were sound asleep, and they never usually roused before, I don't know, 10:30. I'm up at 6 or earlier often. I take farmer's hours seriously, and I like it. And so that day, the first plane flew into the World Trade Center, and I thought, that's kind of weird. A jet? Everybody remembers at one of the King Kong movies with him on top of the Empire State Building batting away biplanes, and some of them actually crashed into the Empire State Building. Didn't bring it down, but they were biplanes. So a jet, a passenger jet, that's weird. And of course, when the second one flew in, then we knew we were under attack. I tried to rouse my friend. He wasn't into it. So, the world changed on a pin. Is that how? Yeah, I know that's a weird metaphor, but nonetheless, let's go with it. And it was a little disarming when my friends suddenly became aware of, wow, the world has suddenly changed. My most profound memory is the day after I was interviewed coming out of my place. I was flying the American flag, because who wouldn't? But in Berkeley, apparently that's weird. So I was interviewed by one of the television stations there, and then just a couple of days later, or I don't know, a month or so, within a month, a lot of us decided to take our flags down because, well, we were attacking a country that had nothing to do with 9/11. But, here we are. And now we have wildfires blazing around us. And as Trump said, one word. Is this his 9/11? No, his 9/11 is, well, I guess not getting VD. Changes with the times, doesn't it? Yes, it does. So we will be getting into some actual news read about the wildfires in Oregon, but I want to assure people that right now we're sort of safe. Let's hope so. I live in somewhat of a protected valley, and there's a few mountainous hills, or hilly mountains, mountainous hills, one of the two, between pretty much acting as somewhat of a barrier, but fire does go up, and it does blow, and can get down into protected valleys, and things get immolated in about 10 minutes' time or less. Whole towns have been razed to the ground, burned to a crisp. I may have mentioned our place up in Blue River. Other places were burned to a crisp. Some outbuildings did burn down, but they were pretty much like shacks. And but the main building on our little ranch did not get burned, thankfully. But places around the property, other properties, other people, other domiciles of other people did burn to the ground up in Blue River on the way to Sisters. Because the mountain goes up on that side of the mountain when you're going up. So, we are in a devastation here. My grandkids live up in Salem, so I'm sure you've been hearing about Salem, not just Proud Boys and 3%ers beating up Black Lives Matter protesters. Not just that. But they've now morphed into a vigilante fire protection army. Because now the right-wingers, the maggots, the QAnon idiots, brown shirts, whatever they are, they're all armed, and they're all very angry. And that's because Antifa has been setting these fires. And here I thought it was a spotted owl. First they were blaming the spotted owl, now they're blaming Antifa. They don't even know who Antifa is. Speaking of which, Scott Adams, I don't know. Maybe cartooning is too much of an intellectual enterprise for that guy. I don't even think it's really that good cartooning. But nonetheless, he is under the impression that Antifa, well, first of all, he's making a slam against Black Lives Matter because, they're so into history, like the 1619 Project. which apparently is propaganda to a racist. That's propaganda. That's not what really happened. We weren't about slavery. Yeah, you weren't about slavery. Anyway, he's trying to slam Black Lives Matter because of their historical perspective when history shows that Antifa was in an alliance with Hitler in Nazi Germany. And with the help of Antifa, he was then able to kill 6 million, I don't know, Antifa members? I don't quite get the logic. But like I said, maybe cartooning for that guy with his shitty cartooning is about the extent of his intellectual capacity. Antifa. Yeah, I don't get it. And people will lap that up. I mean, I sort of get it here in Southern Oregon with these idiots who have no historical perspective, except what I don't know the Internet Russian Agency has told them, because they sure ate the same damn propaganda coming out of that group. And I'm not kidding. I'm not using hyperbole. We are in a fight, and it may be for our lives. Because now we have armed militias, and I don't even want to call them militias. Militias almost denote a kind of organization. Sanctioned organization. These are vigilantes. These are terrorists. These are petty warlords. We are convinced Black Lives Matter Antifa is coming here in Oregon and burning us up. Back in 1980, when I was 25, I said, you know, what's the climate? And everybody on Orange County, the right-wing redneck racists of the times, the Schmitz. The Schmitz was a really right-wing bircher at the time down there, wielded a certain amount of power in the county. Told me that I was just an effing hippie. Shut up. And now I'm called an effing boomer hippie. Or hippie boomer, take your choice. When I have to tell you, the facts show that by 1980, I'd been a punk for almost 5 years by that time. Took a bit of a transition from 75 to 77, let's be clear. Because I was with Cottonmouth and we were anything but punk. But certainly by 78, I didn't cut my hair. I might have been starting to do the pre-Adam Ant little fluffy shirt thing, you know, the neo-romantic look with the ribbon and your little punk ponytail. I had one of those. So, I wasn't a hippie by that time, but I was a punk. And we kind of liked breathing clean air, no matter what people said. And we liked drinking clean water. Yeah, because, you know, it makes better whatever. Everything goes better with clean water, is what I say. And we had to fight for that, apparently, because apparently there's a lot of people that like to drink shit in their water, and they like to choke on poison in the air. It's their God-given right. Well, why do I have to give up my rights for theirs? Which is an intellectual conundrum when you think about it, because why is it that when NFL players join arms before a game, and not even during the national anthem, and they're having a moment of silence in honor of or acknowledgement of racial inequality and that we can be better, and the crowd boos them? What does that say? Making America great again? Boy, do we have a bunch of angry racists. They just cannot stand the fact that really they're making America into a shithole. And they know it. But they're such bullies, they don't care because they have someone to blame. And who will it be? Yes, it'll be us. Sort of like how Trump blamed Woodward. You know, a bully always blames the victim. Well, you should have spoken up louder while I was hitting you to make me stop. Okay. I have a feeling that Trump has beat his wives. I have a feeling. Because the rhetoric coming out of that guy's mouth is exactly what a wife beater does. So, yeah, you should have stopped me. You weren't vociferous enough in your protestations over my beating the crap out of you. Okay, so here we are. We are in a fight for our lives, not only from political ideology, but also from wildfires that ring us, and then you can't get out. There's nowhere to go. Hopefully there's a helicopter that can helicopter us out. Let's hope. What's on the rest of the menu? Here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, too. The French 77s are virtually prepared, even though I didn't get the Saint-Germain for mine in the analog world. Well, at the top, yeah, that was Nicole Wallace breaking it down about how Trump launched an October surprise on himself. Yeah, with less than 2 months till the election, and people are already voting. Yep, I was worried that maybe it might be a little bit too early, but I think we're in the stretch run, and guess what else is coming for an October surprise? And he'll be doing it to himself because he's so self-destructive. On the rest of the menu, the police chief of Connecticut's largest city resigned just hours after being arrested on federal charges. He rigged his own hiring. He did. He rigged it. A group of states petitioned a federal judge to immediately reverse the changes at the US Postal Service. Well, we'll see how that goes. And the West Coast Wildfires have forced over 500,000, that's 500,000 people, to flee their homes here in Oregon. And after the break, we move to the chef's table, where the top opposition activist who resisted her forced expulsion from Belarus by ripping up her passport, we reported on that earlier in the week, well, she's accused Belarusian authorities of threatening to kill her. Well, you would expect that when they put a bag over her head, threw her in a van, and took her, out to the country. And Mexico's militarized police are under investigation after a deadly clash with protesters over a dam diverting water to the United States. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. Off to the right-ish of the page is our chat room link. Right over there by the social media scroll, because it's definitely located by Superior Graphic Design. Thank you, Tom, for that. And Kelly Lincoln monitors the chat room link, and she does much more than just that. So we want to thank her for doing so. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the chat room link, down there at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. And if I know that some of you are already doing this, but for you who are not, if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, your recurring patronage helps us pay our bills, fly under the radar, continue resisting as the founders originally intended, so many years ago. And that is our civic duty, and our civic duty is to resist and broadcast 24/7, 365, which we have been doing for almost 10 years. And we have been able to do that because of the generosity of folks just like you. If you could afford, say, how about an espresso-type coffee drink when we could go out and get those with impunity, sit down, consume it, have a few chats with a few friends right there in live world, analog world? Remember those days? Well, if you can still afford that, and only if you can, all right, please. But if you could, and send that to us once a month, we are quantum mechanics on the quantum level of stretching dollars beyond compare. We leave no strange quark unstretched. No, we don't. And thank you for considering doing so. And we also want to thank those who have been doing so for quite a while. We would truly be unable to do this without you. if you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it is so simple because Tom takes care of it. And you can follow us on Twitter at Netroots Radio. And, of course, Tom also has updated our homepage, our scroll at the top, photograph scroll at the top, is making a statement. And, yes, Black Lives Matter. And you better vote as if your life depends on it, because it does. It does. Thank you, Tom. If you would like to follow me on Twitter, I would suggest you do so, because I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that linked up on social media, and I usually do it on my Twitter account. I try to do it over there at Cookbook West, because that's where you can follow the show. Sometimes I get it there, sometimes I don't, but it's pretty. It's a pretty little addy there. And you can also, most importantly, please pick up podcasts of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, along with other shows on the Netroots Radio spectrum. You can do so at Spreaker, Stitcher, iTunes, iHeart, YouTube, etc., etc., etc. Wherever podcasts can be found, they're everywhere. All right. Let's dive into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. It comes out of the Associated Press by Dave Collins. The police chief of Connecticut's largest city resigned yesterday, Thursday, hours after being arrested on federal charges that he teamed with Bridgeport's personnel director to rig the hiring process to ensure he got the job 2 years ago. Mayor Joe Ganim said that Chief Armando A.J. Perez resigned and that he named Assistant Chief Rebecca Garcia as acting chief after federal prosecutors in New York and FBI officials in Connecticut announced their arrests of Perez and David Dunn, the city's acting personnel director. Perez, age 64, of Trumbull, Connecticut, and Dunn, age 72, of Stratford, Connecticut, were each charged with wire fraud, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and with making false statements to investigators, sort of like what Michael Flynn did and pleaded guilty to. I wonder if Barr's going to step in here. I wonder. Both appeared via video before a federal judge in Bridgeport and were allowed to remain free on $150,000 bail. They did not enter pleas. And, of course, messages seeking comment were left uncommented because that's what always happens. But they have to mention it because this is, after all, the Associated Press. A criminal complaint alleged Perez and Dunn defrauded the city of 144,000 people by rigging the 2018 police chief examination to put Perez in position to secure the post as head of a police department with an annual budget of over $100 million to skim off the top, and more than 400 officers where you can put in a few that don't really exist, but you'll pick up their paychecks maybe, eh? The previous police chief had resigned in March of 2016. Acting U.S. Attorney Audrey Strauss in New York City said the men corrupted what was supposed to be an impartial and objective search for a permanent police chief and, quote, then repeatedly lied to federal agents in order to conceal their conduct, end quote, sort of what Mike Flynn did. And Barr came to his rescue. According to a criminal complaint in Connecticut, Dunn gave confidential examination materials to Perez in advance, including the grading criteria and oral examination questions, and tailored the scoring criteria in Perez's favor. Perez, investigators said, also had 2 police officers secretly take the written exam for him, sort of like what the president of these United States, who's currently occupying the Oval Office, did to get through his educational career. Dunn also instructed officials to eliminate a scoring penalty that would be imposed if the candidates did not have a bachelor's degree, and Perez was the only applicant without one. Convenient. The maneuvers were designed to ensure that Perez, who had been with the police department for nearly 4 decades, would then be ranked among the top 3 candidates and could thus qualify to be awarded a 5-year contract as chief, the complaint said. The terms of his contract included a $300,000 payout for accrued leave and an annual salary of about $145,000, the complaint said. Johnson of the AP brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. A group of states suing over service cuts at the US Postal Service is asking a federal judge to immediately undo some of them, saying the integrity of the upcoming election is at stake. Well, that's not good enough. It isn't. Postmaster General Louis DeJoy has already said he's halting some of the changes. Well, he said he would, including the removal of distinctive blue mailboxes and of sorting machines at some processing facilities. However, 2 remain in effect, the states argue, noting the Postal Service is no longer treating election mail as the equivalent of first-class mail and the so-called leave-behind policy that requires postal trucks to leave at certain times whether or not there is any additional mail to load. In a motion filed in U.S. District Court in Yakima, Washington, the 14 states, including the election battlegrounds of Nevada, Michigan, and Wisconsin, said mail delays have eased since the service cuts first created a national uproar in July, but on-time deliveries remain well below their prior levels, meaning millions of pieces of mail that would otherwise arrive on time no longer are. That's troubling, as millions more voters are expected to vote by mail this year due to the coronavirus pandemics, the state said. The states, led by Washington Attorney General Bob Ferguson, asked Judge Stanley A. Bastian to order the Postal Service to treat election mail, including ballots and registration forms, as first-class mail, ensuring it is delivered promptly, and also end the leave-behind policy and replace or install any removed sorting machines needed to ensure timely processing. Unfortunately, they damaged them so badly they won't be able to get the parts until after the election. Oops, too bad. In a declaration filed along with the motion, information technology consultant Minar Uzier-Hunter, who helped start a website tracking the USPS changes, noted that 78% of the machines slated for removal were in counties won by Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton in 2016. I wonder if that was a suggestion by Vlad. The mind reels. Jillian Flakas and Andrew Zelsky of the Associated Press bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Deadly wildfires in heavily populated northwest Oregon were growing, with hundreds of thousands of people told to flee encroaching flames, while residents to the south tearfully assess their losses. The number of people evacuated statewide because of fires rose to over 500,000, more than 10% of the state's 4.2 million people. One fire approached Malala, triggering a mandatory evacuation order for the community of about 9,000 located 30 miles south of Portland. A police car rolled through the streets with a loudspeaker blaring, "Evacuate now." Inmates were being moved from a women's prison less than a mile from Interstate 5 in Portland's southern suburbs out of an abundance of caution, the Oregon Department of Corrections said. With two large fires threatening to merge, some firefighters in Clackamas County, which includes Malala, were told to disengage temporarily because of the danger. Officials tried to reassure residents who abandoned their homes, and law enforcement officials said police patrols would be stepped up to prevent looting. The local fire department said on Twitter, to be clear, your firefighters are still working hard on the wildfires in Clackamas County. They are taking a tactical pause to allow firefighters to reposition, get accountability, and evaluate extreme fire conditions. We have not abandoned you, the fire officials said. Residents of the small Oregon town of Phoenix near the California state line, right down the little mountain from Ashland, by the way, walked through a scene of devastation after one of the state's many wildfires wiped out much of their community. A mobile home park, houses, and businesses were burned, leaving twisted remains on charred ground. Many of the residents were immigrants with few resources to draw on. Artemio Gutierrez stood helplessly next to his pickup, surveying the rubble of his mobile home. His children sat quietly in the truck bed and waited for him to salvage what he could. He found a ceramic pot with a smiley face on it, some charred miniature houses from a Christmas-themed village, and a cross that formed when two pieces of glass melted together. Gutierrez, a single father of four, had been at work at a vineyard nearby when he saw thick smoke spreading through the Rogue River Valley. He raced home just in time to snatch his kids from the trailer park, where they live alongside dozens of other Mexican families. They got out only with the clothes they were wearing. I'm going to start all over again. It's not easy, but it's not impossible either. You have to be a little tough in situations like this, said Gutierrez, who had just returned from his mother's funeral in Mexico. All right, let's get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You're listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, a celebration. Going back closer to the original title of Charles Dickens' 1850 and widely considered to be autobiographical novel, The Personal History of David Copperfield is the third effort to bring it to the big screen. Despite the sprawling story and Dickensian page count, the bones of the tale and the characters that inhabit it are all present here, and it succeeds based on its script, directorial flourishes, and mostly its performances. The movie starts with one of those flourishes, which is Dev Patel's adult David narrating his own birth. His narration, mostly taken from passages of the book, are heard throughout, usually transitionally. The script is tight and snappy, accentuating a certain type of personality rather than character development. Dickens was a critic of social conditions in the England of his time, and while there are some heavy scenes involving domestic abuse, a character with mental health issues, and poverty all around, this adaptation, perhaps more so than the novel, leaves these issues as ambiance. Director Armando Iannucci's David Copperfield is entertainment, and because of this, much of the ballyhooed multicultural casting works. Victorian England probably made the Jim Crow South look diverse by comparison, but the approach here makes the suspension of disbelief possible in this regard. Not enough good things can be said about Patel's performance in the title role, that of Tilda Swinton as Aunt Betsy, and Ben Whishaw against type as the evil Uriah Heep. The 2020 personal history of David Copperfield is a celebration to be sure, especially for those familiar with the story and its characters. Despite Patel's narration, however, the frenetic pacing may leave those less familiar with the story behind. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Shayla Farzan. Bricks are one of the oldest known building materials, dating back thousands of years. But researchers at Washington University in St. Louis have found a new use for bricks as energy storage units. A team of engineers and chemists have found a way to transform an ordinary house brick into a pseudo-battery, allowing it to conduct and store electricity. The bricks are powerful enough to illuminate an LED light bulb and cost only about $3 to make.
I love the idea of adding value to things that are inexpensive, things that are affordable, things that we kind of take for granted.
Julio Darcy is an assistant professor of chemistry at Washington University and one of the researchers on the project. The brick battery relies on the reddish pigment known as iron oxide, or rust, that gives red bricks their color. The scientists pumped the bricks with several gases that react with iron oxide to produce a network of plastic fibers. These microscopic fibers coat the empty spaces inside the bricks and conduct electricity.
What we're trying to do is we're trying to make specialized plastics that are only used in the nanoscale, where we use very little of the plastic. And we can actually embed that plastic inside construction materials that can store energy.
The study is in the journal Nature Communications. In the future, Darcy says, a brick wall could potentially serve a dual purpose, providing structural support and storing electricity generated from renewable energy sources like solar panels. The technology is still at least a few years away from being ready for the commercial market. Right now, the energy storage capacity of the bricks is still pretty low, about 1% of a lithium-ion battery. The team is now testing ways to improve brick performance, because it looks like you can teach an old brick new tricks. For Scientific American 60-Second Science, I'm Shayla Farzan.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Colorectal cancer is the number 2 cancer killer of men and women in the United States, but it is preventable. Early on, colorectal cancer typically has no symptoms. It starts with a precancerous polyp or abnormal growth in the colon, which can be removed without surgery. Several tests are available to find these polyps, so they can be removed before they turn into cancer. Screening also finds colorectal cancer early when treatment works best. Recommended screening for adults at average risk begins at age 50 and continues until age 75. Learn about screening test options and find out which tests are covered by insurance. Talk to your healthcare provider about when you should be screened and discuss the best tests for you. For more information about colorectal cancer prevention, please visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping Progressive Radio at full power.
Russia is actively interfering again in the 2020 election. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. And that was the conclusion of the Democratic senators contained in the 1,000-page report of the Senate Intelligence Committee released in August. The committee unanimously, on a bipartisan basis, concluded that Russia involved itself deeply in the 2016 U.S. election in order to elect Donald Trump president. There was one major point of disagreement, but not about that fact. The Republican senators emphasized in their addendum that the committee found no evidence that the Trump campaign colluded with Russia. The Democratic senators highlighted that the report itself unambiguously shows that the Trump campaign cooperated with Russia. Cooperation with Russia versus collusion with Russia? Look, it is an important issue, but it's not the critical question today. The critical question today is, how is Russia trying to influence the 2020 election? Using and manipulating social media, creating numerous false organizations and social media accounts, supporting third-party candidates who could change the outcome in closely contested swing states, more, worse? And critically, what is the United States government doing to prevent this foreign adversary from putting its thumb on the electoral scale? A question that needs answering now. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
Let's talk pills. To treat everything from allergies to heart problems, half of Americans take a prescription medicine every day, and nearly all of us reach for the pill bottle on occasion. It's perfectly safe, though, because the Food and Drug Administration regulates the ingredients that go into those medicinal compounds, right? Yes, assuming they're produced in the USA. Aren't they? Mostly, no. Take antibiotics. The New York Times reports that ingredients for the majority of these bacteria fighters are now made almost exclusively in China and India, as are the components of dozens of other major drugs. Unbeknownst to most Americans and to our doctors, China has become the world's preeminent supplier of medicines. As one major drug company puts it, if tomorrow China stopped supplying pharmaceutical ingredients, the worldwide pharmaceutical industry would collapse. What's at work here is mindless globalization and deregulation. Our politicians threw open the U.S. market to drug imports while also letting foreign manufacturers go uninspected and unregulated. So, companies located in China can cut corners and undercut our own regulated pill makers. America's last producer of penicillin's ingredients, for example, shut down in 2004, leaving us dependent on China. FDA, our supposed watchdog, doesn't even know where a drug's ingredients come from. Why? Because drug companies say they don't like to reveal their sources. So they don't. The Times found that one federal database lists the existence of about 3,000 foreign drug plants that ship to the U.S., while another lists 6,800. No one knows which is correct, if either. This is Jim Hightower saying, this is ridiculous. For the sake of America's health, security, and economy, let's regulate all pill makers and rebuild our own industry.
If you'd like more of Jim Hightower's real populism, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter gives you the real lowdown on which corporations, by name, are doing what to the middle class, our environment, and our democracy. Each month, the Hightower Lowdown brings you facts you didn't know, along with actions you can take to fight back. It also comes with a sense of humor. Hightower believes we can fight the gods and still have fun. Plus, get this, it's cheap. Only $15 brings you 12 issues a year. For real populism, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1851. That was the day that a Maryland planter named Edward Gorsuch was killed in Christiana, Pennsylvania. Gorsuch had come to Pennsylvania to try and recapture 3 black men that had escaped from slavery on his farm outside of Baltimore 2 years earlier. A year after the men escaped, Congress passed the Fugitive Slave Act. This penalized helping those who had escaped slavery with a $1,000 fine and up to 6 months in jail. Emboldened by the law, slave catchers chased those who had made the journey to freedom in the north. Gorsuch received news that the men he was looking for were in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. 2 of the escaped slaves were at the farm of William Parker, a black man who had also escaped slavery in Maryland. Located just north of the Mason-Dixon line, Lancaster had a well-established underground railroad network. An armed black self-defense group had developed to stand against the slave catchers. Gorsuch and his son gathered a group of men and headed north. At the Parker farm, they were confronted by a group of at least 50 black men armed with guns and pitchforks. Gorsuch refused to leave, and a gun battle erupted. Gorsuch was shot and killed in the exchange of fire. Parker, his family, and the 3 formerly enslaved men fled to Canada. 38 others who were there that day were charged with treason for taking part in the confrontation. This included Castor Hanway, a white man who had tried to defuse the standoff. None of the charged were ever convicted. In the South, slave owners were outraged that no one was punished. Tensions between the North and South sharpened. As a result, the country moved closer to the Civil War, the bloody conflict that finally ended slave labor. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 53 degrees Fahrenheit, going to be much cooler today, only about 90 degrees to 93 degrees, only that. But that is good because it's a marine layer that's coming in and might tamp down some of the fires that are burning wildly in the region. Partly cloudy skies, expect widespread areas of smoke and haze, reducing visibility. Winds will be out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear skies tonight except wide areas of smoke and haze. And winds will be out of the north at 5 to 10. Mainly sunny skies tomorrow, highs around 94, with widespread areas of smoke and haze, reducing visibility and making it hard to breathe, as we'll speak about in a moment. Winds will be out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Confirmed coronavirus cases in Jackson County, down here in southern Oregon, now stand at 936. We will be well over 1,000 by Monday, sadly. Confirmed deceased stands at 3. Of course, that is always a gross undercount. Ragweed pollen is moderate, but I don't think that's the worst of it because the air quality index is in the hazardous range at 580 parts per million. Stay inside. If you venture outside, you better wear a mask, and it's still not going to be enough. Daytime UV index is high at 6. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.06 inches. Visibility is down to 2 miles, and relative humidity is at 76%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 68 and partly cloudy. Paris is 80 degrees and partly cloudy. Rome is 85 and sunny with a heat advisory coming up because they're going to be hotter. Kyiv is 67 and fair. Kabul is 75 and fair. Hong Kong is 80 degrees and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 82 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 58 and fair. San Francisco, California is 55 with fog mixed with orange smoke. And New York, New York is 75 degrees Fahrenheit and mostly cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Joris Carminow of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A prominent opposition activist who resisted her forcible expulsion from Belarus by ripping up her passport accused Belarusian authorities of threatening to kill her amid their efforts to end a month of protests against the country's authoritarian president. Maria Koloneskova said in a formal complaint released by her lawyer that agents of Belarus's State Security Committee put a bag on her head and drove her to the border with Ukraine before she fought her removal from Belarus and was jailed. They threatened to kill me, Koloneskova said. They stated that if I refused to leave the territory of Belarus voluntarily, they will get me out of the country anyway, alive or in fragments. Oh, a little bit of Khashoggi done to you, eh? She demanded that the nation's investigative committee probe the KGB officers on charges of abduction, illegal detention, and threats of killing. Neither agency commented on Koloneskova's statement because they're still trying to tamp down Navalny's poisoning. Asked about Koloneskova's statement, UN spokesman Stephanie Dujarric said, "We're frankly very concerned about reports of detentions, reported use of force, as well as the pressures that have been put on the opposition, on civil society actors. It's very important that the people of Belarus be able to exercise their political and constitutional rights peacefully in a democratic environment." Opposition activists came under increasing pressure this week as Belarus marked a month since massive demonstrations broke out against Alexander Lukashenko's re-election to a sixth term.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Jose Luis Gonzalez of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Prosecutors in Mexico are questioning 17 militarized police involved in a gunfight that killed a woman and left her husband injured after tensions flared in protests against a dam diverting water to the United States. The National Guard militarized police said 2 people were killed after its officers, quote, repelled aggression, end quote, from armed civilians in the town of Delicias in the drought-hit northern Chihuahua state, following violent demonstrations at the nearby La Boquilla Dam. But officials said the husband had survived and was hospitalized with serious injuries. At a memorial for Jessica Silva, age 36, her mother said the couple were peaceful people who wanted to support the family's farm. The only thing we are fighting for is what belongs to us, the water, for us farmers, because everything is drying up. I keep telling everybody it's the climate. A family friend, Carolina Lopez, said Silva was not armed. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador told reporters he lamented Silva's death and called for an investigation into whether she was killed by the National Guard. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week. Of course, we will broadcast on and meet up on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up on Monday right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Petite.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.